Hello and welcome. I am Cyril Stober. 50 years ago, Nigeria became the first sub-Saharan African nation to join a group of oil exporting countries. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, was formed in 1960, and some 10 years after, in July 1971, Nigeria became its 11th member. Now, the next 5 decades would see Nigeria assuming key roles in the organization, making remarkable contributions to its growth and development. As Nigeria marks 50 years of association with the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, we turn attention to how beneficial this relationship has been in the complex global oil market. Mohammed Sanusi Barkindo, a Nigerian, is the 28th Secretary General of OPEC, assuming office in August 2016. He is the 4th Nigerian to be Secretary General. His Excellency Barkindo parades a rich background in the industry, having held key positions at various times. He was Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, Nigerian Delegate to OPEC Ministerial Conferences, Nigeria's National Representative on OPEC's Economic Commission Board, and had also served as Acting Secretary General. He spearheaded OPEC EU dialogue on energy markets, taxation and environment. Now, these are just a few of a long list of positions he's held. Now, in 2020, he received the prestigious International Petroleum Diplomacy Person of the Year Award. He joins me from OPEC's headquarters in Vienna. Secretary General, welcome to One on One.
Thank you very much for having me, Cyril.
All right. Well, it's been 50 years of this partnership between OPEC and Nigeria. How has it been?
Well, thank you very much. These 50 years have been a journey of mutually beneficial partnership between Nigeria and OPEC. Since joining the organization in July of 1971, Nigeria has established itself in this organization as a consensus builder, as a bridge builder. The organization turned to Nigeria several times in the last 50 years to provide much needed leadership, especially in times of market instability and sometimes geopolitical crisis. In the last 50 years, the oil market has undergone through 6 or now the 7th cycles, as we call them. And this was severe cycles when we had disequilibrium between supply and demand, sometimes caused by demand factors, sometimes by supply, sometimes by geopolitical events. We had the unfortunate situation where 2 of our founder members were at war for 8 years, and one who was invaded by another. And in all these times, the organization turned to Nigeria as a country that is highly respected within the group, that is fair, that is always ready to provide leadership. And you can see in the last 50 years, we have had about 23 heads of delegations to OPEC, ministers of petroleum, from Chief Philip Asiodu, who signed the agreement to join the organization in July 71, to Timothy Silva, who is the current Minister of Petroleum. And as you said, also in your opening remarks, we have provided leadership in terms of providing Secretaries General from Chief Feide of blessed memory, Rilwanu Lukman of blessed memory, His Royal Highness Mingi Edmond Dakoru, and now my humble self. So it's been a very mutually beneficial partnership. We have benefited immensely from our membership of this organization in terms of the stability that we jointly provide to the oil market. Someone once told me that if OPEC was not founded in 1960, some people would have founded something similar to OPEC. And because, as you can see, the oil market is a cyclical market, very vulnerable to shocks, and the need to maintain stability on a sustainable basis is not only in the interest of we producers, but also the consuming countries.
All right.
And therefore, OPEC has taken center stage, despite the fact that at its inception, most world media outlets did not give it any chance of survival. It's probably the only commodity organization that has survived for this long.
Well, thank you so much. But obviously, the oil market is a volatile one, as you've admitted yourself, and run an organization like OPEC is pretty complex. Now, how well has Nigeria played a role in bringing stability to this cartel and the development of its growth and ensuring that it's sustainable? OPEC is 60 years now, right?
Yes, I would respectfully request you to drop the word cartel. We are no longer a cartel. We are a very open organization with the highest level of transparency. The Americans nowadays call us a fishbowl because of the level of transparency. Contrary to earlier media reports that we have been engaged in manipulating or fixing prices, totally to the contrary. This organization was founded on the core principles of openness, of frankness, of transparency, of sharing data, and taking decisions in the interest of both producers and consumers. I can tell you, Cyril, that our data, including our decisions, from 1960 to date, are available online. Nowadays, our meetings are also live streamed. We're glad to see your reporters continuously covering this organization. So to come back to your question or your comment, it has been a roller coaster because of the cyclical nature of this commodity. And this commodity is vulnerable to shocks more often than not outside the supply-demand fundamentals of oil. For example, geopolitics. We try as much as possible to insulate this commodity from politics. We also try as much as possible to insulate the organization, OPEC, from geopolitics. These two have been the recurring decimals, if you like, in the last 60 years. It has been a challenge to do this because the energy landscape globally has transformed tremendously from the time that OPEC was founded in Baghdad in 1960 to date. And this commodity has become the commodity of choice for global consumers. It is the commodity that has driven this civilization, if you like. The growth, the development, and the prosperity of the current civilization is attributable to this energy source, oil and gas. And according to our projections for the foreseeable future, oil and gas will continue to dominate the global energy basket. More than 50% of the global basket will be accounted for by oil and gas, despite the advocacy of the energy transition.
Well, obviously, over the years, you've built a solid reputation for the organization. And in the issue of insulating the product from politics, yes, but the member countries, their, political standing dictates how they respond to international issues. Has it been easy doing this, given the fact that in the matter of production levels, OPEC agrees on certain caps? How has it been ensuring that its members are united in observing those production ceilings and not exceeding, depending on what the countries are, how the countries are operating?
It's certainly not been easy because of the complexities of the issues involved. But it would be interesting for you to know that we have had a period where two of our founder members were at war for 8 years, for long 8 years. And for those 8 years, these countries who sat next to each other because of the alphabetical nature of our sitting arrangements at ministerial meetings and other meetings, they sat next to each other and we discussed, we negotiated with them, we took decisions with them, and we implemented those decisions, despite the fact that they were at war. We had a situation also where when one member country invaded another member country. And yet during this period, Cyril, we did not adjourn our meetings, sign die. We continued to meet, we continued to negotiate, we continued to consult with each other. At the end of the day, we reached agreements and we decided to implement those agreements together with those fellow member countries. It's not been easy, but at least we can beat our chest that despite the challenges of the time, despite the geopolitics of the time, OPEC has been able to stay afloat, if you like, insulate itself from the geopolitics of the time, as well as insulating this commodity required by all and sundry. Our consumers are all over the world. Before the pandemic, Cyril, this world consumed on average, on a daily basis, 100 million barrels of oil a day. 100 million barrels a day. Therefore, it's not in the interest of either we producers or consumers to politicize this commodity. This commodity is for global consumers. The world needs this energy source, despite the fact that now we are advocating for diversification into other alternative sources of energy. Yes, for good reasons and based on the science, all the sources of energy will be required today, tomorrow, and in the foreseeable future.
Right, Secretary General, all this happened and OPEC tried to maintain its stance, but no one could have foreseen the global pandemic, which came in and threatened just about every part of the world. How has that pandemic impacted on OPEC, its members, and their operations?
The virus, the COVID-19 virus, has brought the world to a near standstill. When we had our last meeting of the year, December 2019, Cyril, we never anticipated that the world will turn upside down just in few months. But when it did, we were stunned. We saw demand, for example, of this commodity that I just told you, that we were consuming about 100 million barrels a day. We saw a contraction in one day of 22 million barrels a day. 22 million contraction. Why? Because the world came to a standstill. People were not flying, people were not driving, people were not going to work, they were teleworking, shops were closed, and we were faced with double whammy, if you like. On the one side of the equation, we had this massive demand contraction that was unprecedented. We had never seen this in the history of oil. On the supply side, we were faced with an avalanche of supply from producers that was threatening inventories. And for us, inventory is a major metric in measuring stability of the oil market. Now, thank God, way back in 2016, we, OPEC, reached out to countries outside of OPEC, the non-OPEC countries led by the Russian Federation. We came clean to say this market has grown, this market has become so sophisticated, but yet volatile and fragile. To maintain stability on a sustainable basis, we needed all producers to come on board. And we needed you, non-OPEC, to join us. And don't forget then, we were facing the last cycle, 2014, 2016, when prices plunged by over 80% as a result of a supply shock. And we were able to bring 10 of these producers outside of OPEC. We sat down, we negotiated with them, we agreed on a framework called the Declaration of Cooperation, which we started implementing in January 2017. And this was for the first time in history. We had never had such a framework with producers outside of OPEC. As a result of the implementation of this framework, the agreement from January, we saw the market rebounded, we saw the global economy resurge, and over time, we have developed this partnership based on trust and confidence between us, and we decided to make it a Catholic marriage, if you like, to continue the partnership not only during a crisis, such as during the downturn, but throughout. Because if there is one thing that is certain in today's world, it's uncertainty. So when COVID struck last year, we did not need to reinvent the wheel. We went back and dusted this framework, and we worked on that framework, and it guided us. In April of last year, we decided with the non-OPEC to adjust production on a global level by a whopping 9.7 million barrels a day. This was the largest supply adjustments ever, not only in the history of OPEC, but also in the history of oil. Secondly, unlike what we had before, our agreements most of the time were for a duration of 6 months to 1 year. But because of the gravity of the situation that we faced last year, we decided to go for a 2-year duration to begin to implement the adjustments from May of last year to April 2022. We also revamped the Joint Ministerial Monitoring Committee, bringing both OPEC countries and the non-OPEC countries together to monitor the implementation.
Okay.
Thirdly, we also decided to be meeting on a monthly basis. In 2020, Cyril, the ministerial conference met 9 times. In 2021, so far, we have met 6 times. So it's been an extremely busy time, very challenging, but I can tell you that the decisions turned out to be judicious, timely, and the implementation excellent. To date, our level of conformity to the decisions we have taken average over 100%.
Okay.
And we have seen how the market responded from one day on the 20th of April last year, when one of the major global benchmark crudes, the West Texas Intermediate in New York, went to negative pricing. It went to minus $38 per barrel, meaning that sellers were paying buyers to take their crude because it went into negative territory for the first time in the history of oil. But we have rebounded, and you can see how the market is performing these days. But this recovery is still fragile because of the so many uncertainties that we are facing. And let's not forget, this crisis was caused by a virus.
Right.
It's primarily a human crisis.
Okay.
And until we are able to conquer the spread of this virus, these uncertainties are likely to linger.
Okay. And, the virus, we're beginning to see variants of it. So it might still be very dicey, what the situation we have now. But, Secretary General, obviously the doctrine of cooperation must have been key in taking all those measures you did to stabilize the market in the face of this pandemic.
There is no doubt, Cyril, cooperation and dialogue have been center and at the forefront of the declaration of cooperation. When I arrived here in the summer of 2016, stocks inventories have built up globally to unprecedented levels. Over 400 million barrels of oil were floating over the 5-year average. And then it had never happened. It was the highest ever. And therefore, because of the inverse relationship between stocks and prices plunged by over 80%. And because OPEC is a marginal supplier to the global markets, we needed help from the non-OPEC country to join us to agree to take these decisions, to subject themselves to the discipline of OPEC, including for the first time to subject the jurisdiction of their production profile to a monitoring mechanism set up by OPEC. And this had taken me around world capitals to try to explain to governments and get their concurrence and give their energy ministers the necessary mandate to be able to come to Vienna. This has proven extremely helpful, and it's responsible for the various agreements that we reached. First, we met in Algiers, if you recall, on September the 30th, 2016, as OPEC, and we decided to come back to the core principles of OPEC, which is production management. And two, we agreed to bring down our production levels to a negotiated level. And thirdly, we agreed to open the doors for the non-OPEC to join us. And between September and December the 10th of 2016, I was able to go around all these non-OPEC countries, and thank God they saw and accepted the message that at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. We produce the same commodity. We sell to the same global markets. We are subject to the same pricing mechanisms. And most of our countries are dependent on the revenues accruing to us through this commodity. And hence the historic meeting of 10th of December 2016, where 24 producing countries from both OPEC and non-OPEC met here in Vienna and took this historic decision and agreed to begin to implement as at January 2017. So with what happened last year, our partners stayed faithful to the Declaration of Cooperation. They joined us in taking this another historic decision of 9.7 million barrels a day for 2-year duration, continuing to subject their jurisdiction to this monitoring mechanisms of OPEC. And we cannot complain. Things are looking much, much brighter at the moment than what we witnessed last year. But in addition to that, Cyril, we also agreed as OPEC that oil is beyond just the consideration of producing countries. It's historic to get these producers all around to take these historic decisions. But what about the consumers? We as OPEC, we have a vested interest in the sustainability, the longevity of oil as an energy source. Oil is in competition with other energy sources. Therefore, we have to reach out to our consumers. We have to take them into account in all the decisions that we take. And hence, as of today, we have a thriving high-level energy dialogue with the European Union. We have one with China. We have one with India. We have one with the United States. And we have other dialogues with international organizations such as the International Energy Agency, which is the representative of the consumer groups. So OPEC is on all fronts trying to make sure that we remain a reliable and dependable supplier of energy to global markets for the foreseeable future.
All right, Secretary General, let's localize an aspect of pricing. Nigeria is a huge, big producer of oil, but then sometimes it leads to all kinds of situations with the public in the country. Now, you were once chief executive of the NNPC, and I'm sure you're quite familiar with this scenario I'm painting. The prices go up in the international market. It means bigger revenue for the country, but not many Nigerians can understand that this also means paying a higher price at the pump.
Well, you are quite right. There is a contradiction of some sorts because the better prices that we are witnessing today, the stronger market conditions that we are witnessing today, is due largely to the cooperation and the commitment of member countries of OPEC, including Nigeria, that jointly took this decision to restore stability to the oil market after the near collapse that we saw last year. And I must use this opportunity to commend Nigeria, ably represented by Minister Timi Silva, for not only using flexible methods at this meeting, but being very cooperative and forward-looking in joining the consensus, not only joining the consensus, but working for the consensus, and now implementing 100%. 100%. Nigeria is fully compliant. But on the issue that you have raised, it is about the issue of capacity within the country to refine our abundant crude oil resources, to provide the domestic public with petroleum products at affordable prices. You are very much aware that the reform program of government anchored on the long-awaited petroleum industry bill has taken a rather long time to come to where it is now. The passage of the petroleum industry bill by the 9th National Assembly of our country is a turnaround moment for this industry. This industry is a very capital-intensive industry. It's an industry that drives growth and development in our country because it accounts for the bulk of government revenue as well as foreign exchange earnings. But the absence of legislation, this legislation has hampered the implementation of the laudable reforms of government in the industry. To keep this industry on the path of sustainable growth, to keep this industry fully invested in as a capital-intensive industry on a regular and predictable basis, to continue to grow capacity, to meet not only our domestic demand, but also international demand. Our country now, it's over 200 million people. We need more energy. And the international community is also looking up to Nigeria as a resource-rich country, energy resource country, to continue to supply international markets. Therefore, we have now reached this critical point with the passage of the bill by the two chambers of the National Assembly, and hopefully moving into the phase of implementation. I have said severally in various fora since I received the good news from Abuja that this bill has been passed, not only to commend the 9th National Assembly, whom I have said severally have engraved their names in gold by taking this bold and timely decision to pass this bill. Once the bill is signed into law, hopefully very soon, I believe the Ministry of Petroleum, the other agencies, NNPC, DPR, will all move to the next phase of its implementation.
All right.
The reform program is time bound. They are very capable people, both in the ministry and NNPC, DPR, and other agencies. And I have absolute confidence that the future of the oil and gas industry in Nigeria is a bright one, and indeed guaranteed by the passage of this legislation.
Okay. Well, this is a good time to talk about investments in the oil sector. You have also spoken about what you call energy poverty. And so, Secretary General, what are the best strategies to address this energy poverty that you talked about and investments in the oil sector, particularly in African countries and specifically in Nigeria?
Thank you very much for raising this very topical issue. Energy poverty is the other side of the scourge. The world is faced with the vagaries of climate change. But the other side of the coin is energy poverty. In our continent today, 600 million people, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, still have no access to electricity, what we take for granted in other climes, no access to electricity. Nearly 900 million people, again, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, have no access to clean cooking fuels. Now, energy poverty is, to say the least, endemic in developing countries, in emerging economies. but in particular in our region, sub-Saharan Africa. Yet, we are also at the receiving end of the impact of climate change. You live in our country. You can see from desertification to erosion to rising seas to irregular rainfalls affecting our agriculture and what have you. So I fully commend the stance of the government that while government has decided through the UNFCCC, through the Paris Agreement and various bilateral agreements to work with other countries in a multilateral fashion to address climate change, we also have to address the other side of the coin in poverty. We have enough resources, enough energy resources, both underground as well as alternative sources of energy, namely renewable. But as you rightly said, the key issue here is investments. How can we continue to attract the required investments on a sustainable basis, on a predictable basis? And don't forget, it's a very capital-intensive industry. Now, the fundamental here is the issue of this legislation. Investors want certainty. They want certainty, they want clarity of what the fiscal terms are, what are the regulatory terms of bringing in their capital to invest, to explore, to mine, to produce, to refine, to distribute. Without this clarity, without this certainty, we continue to face what we have been facing in the last 20 years. Most of the investments that we have seen in the industry were driven by government. But this is not sustainable because government also have other demands on them. Their plate is always full with demands from all sources: education, health, infrastructure, and what have you. Now, with the PIB on the verge of being passed into an act, these uncertainties will be cleared. And the government, through the ministry, through NMPC, would be able to engage their partners to promote projects that will be bankable, that will be easily attracting capital on a sustainable basis. According to our outlook, on a global basis, from now to 2045, the oil and gas industry will require about 12 trillion US dollars in investments, 12 trillion US dollars, to continue to meet current demand as well as the growth rate of demand to 2045. Now, the bad news here is that in the year of COVID 2020, we saw a contraction in investments in the upstream, in the midstream, in the downstream, to nearly 30%. 30% contraction. This has never happened. It's unprecedented. Between 2014 to 2016, we witnessed over 50% cumulative contraction in investments in the industry. And we have not yet recovered from this massive global contraction before COVID struck last year, and we saw this 30%. So we are way behind the curve, and the PIB is coming probably at the right time that will transform this industry to make it more attractive despite the advocacy on renewables and other sources, to continue to attract these investors Now, I want to use this opportunity also to clear one thing, that oil and gas will continue to be the dominant sources of energy for the foreseeable future. Up to 2045, in our focus, we see these two sources of energy accounting for over 53%, of the global energy mix. The underground resources we have in the region between 1.5 to 1.7 trillion proven barrels of oil underground. Nigeria accounts for a substantial part of that, nearly 40 billion barrels of proven reserves. And Nigeria is still, in terms of exploration, still a virgin territory because we have concentrated most of our exploration and production activities in the Niger Delta, and hence the degradation on the environment in that important region of our country.
Well, sometimes this tends to be a little bit confusing to people who are not vast in knowledge about these matters. But one thing one would want to ask is how will this investing in oil and gas continued exploration, how will it play against the SDG 7, for instance, the sustainable goals, where it talks about access to affordable, sustainable, and renewable energies. It seems to me that there's going to have to be some kind of balancing act here.
There is no doubt. I think there is also some misinterpretation in some parts of the global community on what the SDG 7 means and stands for. The SDG 7 provides that the global community must have access to affordable energy. It has, for the United Nations, for the first time, made access to energy a matter of right, not a privilege. And as a result of that, governments around the world are now, if you like, mandated by the global community of the United Nations to ensure that they design and implement programs that will combat energy poverty. A situation where 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa have no access to electricity is unacceptable to the global community, is unacceptable to the United Nations, and hence the SDG 7. But these issues are interconnected. We need investments, massive investments, to combat climate change. We also need massive investments to combat energy poverty. For us, the challenge here, Cyril, it's about greenhouse gas emissions that are being emitted by different sources, not only of energy, but also of enterprise. It is these carbon emissions that are responsible for global warming, for climate change. Therefore, the world should focus on how to address, combat, and conquer these emissions. And how? Through policies and measures, using technology and adequate funding, such as the carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration technologies. These emissions can be captured, they can be stored safely underground, and we can reach our targets of carbon neutrality through that, not through policy fears, not through decrees, but for governments working with the private sector, with industry, and the scientific community, and very importantly, the banking and financial sector, who should be funding these projects to make sure that we leave a better world for not only this current generation, but future generations. But oil and gas will continue to play its part. It has to play its role in decarbonizing the world. It has the wherewithal, it has the impeccable credentials. We have always been in the forefront of using cutting-edge technologies in the oil and gas sector. And in the case of decarbonization and climate change, we are part of the solution. We are not part of the challenge.
Well, you have emphasized this not a few times on this program, that oil isn't going anywhere as soon as most people would expect. But then there are critical needs of your members, and particularly prominent members like Nigeria, critical needs in the investment and the run of the sector. For instance, an easy one that comes to mind is pipeline security. How can this be addressed?
Well, following the data that I received periodically from NNPC, they are making giant strides in addressing this domestic challenge that we have been facing across the pipeline network in our country. You also at the NTA and other agencies have an important role to play in terms of sensitization, raising awareness that it is extremely dangerous, even to those who are pilfering these pipelines because of the combustible nature of oil and gas. And secondly, it is not in our economic interest to do that. And thirdly, we need to protect these assets as our own assets. These assets are not just government or NNPC assets. These are our assets. If the pipeline right of way passes through your community, through your village or towns, it is also the responsibility of those communities to put an eye that their children do not play football around there, do not tamper with these assets. In terms of the enforcement, I'm glad that NNPC and DPR, from the reports that I received, are doing extremely well in this regard. And you can see the numbers, and they keep track of these numbers, and they report them regularly. They continue to come down. And this is in the interest of all of us, and including also the global community. These are crude oil pipelines, they are product pipelines, they are gas pipelines providing power to power stations. So we have to all play our part. We all have a role to play our part. I would like to see jingles, for example, on NTA and other radio stations to sensitize, to raise awareness among our populace, especially among the young ones, to stay away from these facilities. They're extremely dangerous to tamper with, and also to raise the awareness in terms of the ownership, that these are their own strategic assets. It doesn't belong to one government or the other. Right. And therefore, we all have to continue to play our part to protect these strategic assets.
Oh, all right, but I must say that's a responsibility the NTA has been carrying over the years, and it continues to do that. But Secretary General, as we begin to wind down, there's this other aspect which we would like to ask you about. Sometimes OPEC is placed in a situation where non-OPEC members and certain world powers take decisions that may affect members of the organization in their operations and the oil market itself. I'm referring specifically to the USA. Also, the issue of shale gas. What's this relationship like these days?
Thank you very much. This is a very important issue you have raised. The United States remained the biggest producer of oil in the world, the biggest consumer of oil in the world. Therefore, when we met on 10th of December 2016 here in Vienna to ink our signatures on the historic partnership between OPEC and non-OPEC under this framework of declaration of cooperation, we decided that this partnership may be incomplete without having the biggest producer on the table. Therefore, they mandated me to head to the United States and explore possibilities. And we convened our first meeting in 2017 with all the major producing companies in the shale basins of the United States in Houston, Texas. It was, if you like, a bread-breaking meeting because of a number of reasons in the past, including the antitrust encumbrances. It was not easy to convene this meeting. And I must tell you, when they came in large numbers, but they came with their antitrust lawyer to guide us that we were on the side of the law and not against it. We were both pleasantly surprised with the turnout at that meeting. And at the end of that bread-breaking meeting, we all realized that we were in the same boat. Whether you are a producer in the shale basins of the US, or you are a producer of Bonilite or Focados in Nigeria, or Arab Light in Aramco, we are producing the same commodity, selling to the same global markets. And we agreed to continue this dialogue because we found it was in the best interest of both of us. They benefited immensely from these exchanges that we had. Long hours in Houston, very open, very frank, under Chatham House rules. And we saw this close cooperation continuing. We saw in April of last year, when the market went into that spiral, for the first time, the President of the United States got involved with OPEC to find a solution to this deadlock that we found ourselves in. We were facing an unparalleled situation, a contraction that was never witnessed in history.
All right.
And so I think so far so good. We continue this dialogue with the US. We continue exchange of information with them. And so far we have held nothing less than 7 or 8 of these meetings with them.
All right.
And we continue to reach out to all partners around the world who are major stakeholders in the energy landscape.
All right. Well, we'll have to leave this conversation at this point, and thank you very much. Excellency Mohammed Sanusi Barkindo, Secretary General, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. It's been interesting talking to you. Thank you for giving us your time on this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cyril, for having me.
All right. And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with One-on-One. I am Cyril Stover, and I say continue to stay safe.
and never get this kind of thing. Or